Okie dokie. Can you guys see this? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we can see it, Dan.
All right. Cool. All right. So today we're going to be talking about conflict resolution and everything surrounding it, how to go about it, different styles of conflict resolution. And yeah. Okay. So let's get started. So when we think about conflict, what really comes to mind is when could be two separate individuals, could be two groups of people, two or more groups of people, and they can disagree about, values or their certain motivations or perceptions, ideas or goals. And really at the crux of it is if either side feels threatened by a certain disagreement that's going on, right? Whether that um, disagreement or difference is real or imagined. It could be like a supposed threat rather than like an actual one that's there. And so especially when we're um, in a group dynamic, and if it's not managed effectively, if it's not sort of nipped in the bud as it were, um, it can really affect relationships. It can affect your teamwork in group projects or just even in families and relationships. Any type of social interaction you can have can really be affected negatively by it. Um, so, conflict is just a natural part of life and relationships. You're going to come up against it time and time again. It's just one of those things. It's just a staple of life, right? But the way that we respond to conflict is really shaped by our own personal perceptions, right? And these perceptions can be um, affecting us by our influences from outside experiences, from our culture, from our values, from our beliefs. Um, and when you really ignore conflict, it it festers, right? I don't know if you've ever had like a disagreement with a friend and it's just left unsaid and then it kind of like boils to like a fever pitch and it just gets worse. And ultimately it gets more difficult to resolve like the longer it goes unmentioned or uh, like not fixed, right? And when we get into these, conflicts with other people or other groups or whatever, um, it can really stir up intense emotions, right? We might feel uh, some physical sensations, like some stress going on, and we might feel like our adrenaline is pumping. We might get emotional. Um, and when you can be in the moment in a conflict and when you can handle it constructively, it can really lead to a lot of personal growth and a lot of really great outcomes can be born out of like a very not so great thing. um, and so our mindset towards any sort of conflict can play a role in how we choose to respond, and I'll go deeper into that as we go along. um, so you might be thinking, what is conflict resolution? So essentially conflict resolution is being able to manage a conflict effectively that helps you achieve a certain goal with another party. It can strengthen relationships and it can kind of bolster some sort of morale. Um, and so when you're thinking about uh, resolving something that's going on, resolving a conflict, there's some sorry, 9 strategies that you can kind of keep in mind. So the first one is perspective, and you have to keep in your mind that most people have good intentions and want to do the right thing. And so if you are on like the opposite side, it's good to kind of keep an open mind and see that, someone else might be feeling this way because this happened to them. Um, and empathize with them, kind of recognize and really respond to what the other person is talking about and what they care about. And we want to maintain, sort of this emotional control, stay aware of our emotions, kind of regulate our emotions and make sure that we're not lashing out or saying things that we don't mean, keeping things in check, right? And this goes into composure, right? I don't know if you've ever been in any sort of disagreement with someone, but sometimes, our emotions get the better of us, and we might lash out, in a rash manner, and then kind of really regret it afterwards. And so it's good to kind of take a beat and really um, compose yourself, respond calmly, and without defensiveness, right? It's sort of like don't have your response already made up before the other person is finished talking, right? Um, and collaboration is a very important part of this because you want to aim for a compromise and work together instead of blaming someone or penalizing someone for whatever conflict is going on. Um, and it can be hard to address it head on, right? Because the natural, or maybe for some people, the natural response is to just kind of retreat and, not mention it and, oh, it'll get better with time. But, you know, doing something like head on, like resolving something like this, it takes a lot of courage. It can be very difficult to do. And the more you work at it, the easier it'll get. I'm not saying that it's completely easy, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll feel when you're doing it. And being able to communicate effectively, um, that includes active listening, that includes responding clearly to what people are saying, and having a respectful dialogue, like no name calling or no, anything like that, kind of keeping it cordial, even if emotions are high, you can still keep things on like a neutral playing field, right? And of course, the resolution, um, learning to forgive, being able to let go of any sort of resentment that might surface or might already be there when the conflict is going on, and being able to move forward, you know, as like a whole group, right? Or as like, if it's just one other person, then being able to move past it, right? So I know I said this already, but being able to stay calm and relieve your stress. Um, if you're stressed out already and you go into like some sort of conflict, it's going to heighten for sure. But it's important to kind of stay centered, stay focused, stay balanced, so that you can really kind of um, get get where you need to go in terms of resolving the conflict. And if you're not able to stay centered, you're more likely to get overwhelmed, kind of retreat into yourself, and you might not be able to communicate effectively. And if it's in a work environment, if it's in like a class environment, it's important to stay professional, um, and use your critical thinking skills, right? We don't, we have to analyze what's going on, and we have to focus on the problem and solving the problem. So when you're in a conflict, in the middle of trying to resolve it, stress, the reduction of stress, can help you interpret more of what's going on, because if you're stressed out, you might not be paying attention fully, right? You're able to truly listen to what someone is saying. And if you're kind of curbing this stress, you're able to be more aware of your own emotional state, right? That sort of introspection that you might do during times of stress is increasingly important when you're in these conflicts, right? Because essentially it just makes it easier for you to um, communicate what you need and being able to hear fully what the other person needs. And so our emotional awareness, um, being able to communicate without making other people feel threatened, right? Being able to say things that are, you know, that might hold some emotional value, but being able to say them in a calm, cool manner, um, and paying attention to, body language, because both, you know, um, verbal and nonverbal cues are, equally as important. Hmm. And so our critical thinking skills come into play when we're trying to resolve a conflict. And so what this essentially means is being able to think deeper about what is going on, kind of understand why something's happening, how it's happening, how it even could come to this, right? And being able to use like your logic and reasoning skills uh, to kind of parse through everything and figure out what's going on. And if you have assumptions or if you have thoughts coming into something, it's good to ask questions, right? Um, because you want to rely on evidence rather than feeling, because it might not be founded. It could be unfounded, right? And it's especially important to keep an open mind whenever you're in a conflict, because you're if you're kind of in like this rigid state, right? You're in this box, you're kind of like you have these blinders on, so you might not be able to, see other points of view. But if you keep an open mind, right? If you open the lid of the box, whatever, you're able to kind of absorb these different perspectives and trains of thought that you might not have um, in the past, right? And sorry, sorry about that. Um, when you're going through a conflict and when you're trying to resolve something, having the confidence to ask difficult questions is increasingly important, um, because it can be quite difficult, right? For some introverted people, speaking up can be, a, a massive undertaking, right? So it definitely takes some practice and some patience and some grace within yourself to be like, okay, I'm getting better at this. I'm not going to be perfect after, one time. It's going to take a little bit of time to ask certain questions and to, speak up. Um, and what I said earlier about the introspection and how it relates to your emotional awareness, it also relates to your critical thinking skills as well, because you might need to stop and ask yourself, hey, like, am I doing what's right, what's needed? Am I doing stuff for myself? Am I, not being a doormat to other people? Like, am I getting my needs but also it's kind of a tightrope to walk, right? Because as we'll see a little later, am I pushing too hard, right? Am I only caring about my needs and not the other person's needs, right? Um, and just being able to absorb all of that and understand everything before you react, even though it kind of might go against how you're, instinctual, like how I'm going to react, right? But sometimes all the information needed is necessary in order to fully react, right? And it's okay to disagree with somebody, right? As long as it's in a respectful way. Like it's not like in an I hate you way. It's like I respect you as a person, but I disagree with you on this and agree to disagree and leave it at that, right? And moving forward to problem solving skills, um, it kind of goes down in like step by step. So clearly define the problem. And then after that, kind of work with the other person to identify the desired outcome, right? And really see how you can get from where we are now to where we want to be, right? From point A to point B. And being flexible is a lot of the work, right? It's okay to be, you know, malleable and kind of creative um, with the outcomes that you are trying to come up with, because there's certain conflicts that might not solve everybody's problems, but it could solve like the source of the problem, right? It's good to know your available resource. Um, whether that's you know a professor weighing in, or whether that's a staff member or faculty or anyone else weighing in. Being able to collaborate with others, especially when they aren't your favorite cup of tea. Um, because we can learn from everyone, right? We're able to, you know, learn from other people, and in turn they're able to, learn from us, and all this knowledge is valuable because if you come up against a problem, later in life, you can look back and be like, oh wow, that's similar to like what I worked with this one person, and the way they did it didn't really work out, but maybe if I tried this way, it might work out. Um, and then try to advocate for better results and don't try to settle for less. But again, it's all situational. Um, okay. So within conflict resolution, there are five main types of people who go about handling conflict differently, right? We have accommodators, we have avoiders, which I've talked about a little bit already, collaborators, compromisers, and competitors. So let's go into accommodators. So accommodators essentially set aside their own goals, right, to satisfy others. They're cooperative people, but they're not really assertive, right? And it kind of creates this loss for themselves or they create a better outcome at the expense of themselves, if that makes sense. And there are advantages for this, right? Because it can be used to maintain friendships. But also the disadvantages, um, you might lead to being taken advantage of because you might be seen as like a doormat who, doesn't doesn't have their needs met, right? Um, and it's also best used when you're trying to maintain friendships where the relationship matters more than the outcome, right? If it's just a trivial thing or if it's just something that you can live with, then that's okay. Like the issue isn't important, or rather, if it's, something else, harmony and stability are just, not rocking the boat, having clear waters is the main priority. Um, Avoiders, I've spoke about this earlier, but avoiders withdraw, they can both withdraw from and also ignore conflict. You know, they kind of like leave the conversation, and, they're unassertive, uncooperative, and it really doesn't lead to a satisfying resolution, right? And it often creates like this lose lose sort of situation, because it kind of circumvents this entire notion of a resolution. And there could be some advantages to this, right? It can preserve relationships that might be damaged by confrontation. Like if you're on the outs with someone, and you just don't want it to get any worse, Um, but there's disadvantages, right? Because time and time again, problems could stay unresolved, right? And there are good ways to use this, right? Um, the issue is minor, or confrontation could lead to, the dissolution of the relationship, right? So collaborators, um, they come together with the other people, and they try to work on the problem as best as they can together, valuing both like the relationships that are already there or might be there, and the results. They try to get the best outcome from everybody, right? And they aim for these win-win outcomes. So you win, I win, right? Both sides benefit. It's a big reduction in negativity. Um, Downside can be time consuming. It might require a lot of effort, a lot of patience, a lot of, flexibility and creativity. But in the end, it's the best way to do it. But I'll go into that more later. Um, it's best used when relationships are important, you know, and there is ample time for a discussion to lead to a resolution, or when there's, conflicts within your peers or your classmates or whoever. Um, or if you're, maybe in like a club setting, and two people are having, two conflicting things of an event that they want to do, or where they want the club to go to, or if you're in a group project and you want to work on different things, could be about like merging those together, right? Compromisers focus on managing the conflict than winning, right? So it kind of balances the goals with the relationships, right? And so these people are willing to give up part of their goals, while others are also doing the same. So like, you don't get to have everything, but I don't also get to have everything, but we still walk away feeling good, right? But we, maybe like 70% of what we want we got, or 80%, or whatever it is, you know, and it maintains relationships, and it can resolve issues quite quickly sometimes. Um, but also, it might lead to less than ideal outcomes. But it's best used when there's complex issues where there's just too many moving parts going on, or if two people have, sort of this equal power dynamic going on. Um, but there could be limited time. Okay. Competitors. So competitors, like I was saying earlier, use a direct, very forceful style where in this instance, I'm the competitor. My goals are more important than what you want or even the relationship, right? They might rely on very assertive and or aggressive tactics, right? So, it might be advantageous when there might be, a quick decision when the person's position is correct, right? When it's just like the right thing, you need to do. There's no compromise. But it can also create this big, big sense of resentment or even hostility going on. But there are uses where it is helpful, where like you're in an urgent, sort of kind of chaotic environment and like a decision is needed like right now, right? Or if you're in a position where like the relationship isn't essential, right? Like I'm kind of done with this friendship or relationship, you know, or if there's two people who have very different um, personal differences, right? Or others might exploit passive behavior, right? Okay, so this is an XY axis where cooperative is on the X axis or the horizontal axis, and assertiveness is on the Y axis or the vertical. So as you can see, with high assertion and low cooperation, you get this competing, I win, you lose sort of situation. Did I freeze? I think I froze. But anyways, on the low assertion, low cooperation, you get this avoidant behavior, right? And then on the high cooperation, sort of low assertion, you get this accommodation, and then same thing with collaborating and compromising, which compromising is like right in the center, right? Jeez. Sorry, we have some technical difficulties. Okay, I'm back. Can you guys still see the slide?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It froze for a sec for me. So I may have been alluding to this all along, but which one do you guys think is best, right? There might be certain situations where we can use all these different sort of tactics or styles or however you want to call them, but in actuality, all of them are the best because there is no best, right? There's no one right formula to handle conflict. There might be, a group of different types of conflicts that you can, handle similarly, but every time it's going to be a little different, right? And it also requires a different response because every time we enter something, like a conflict, we have new perspectives, we have new thoughts, we have new ideas, we have new everything, right? So we're kind of these new people entering, so we kind of can't be, we can't react the same exact way because, you might not have acted that way, or reacted that way like a year ago or 2 years ago, right? And so sorry, as a society, we really teach, or like society teaches, two heads are better than one, and that's collaborating. Kill your enemies with kindness, which is accommodating. Split the difference, compromising. Leave well enough alone, avoiding. And might makes right, competing. Hmm. So, yeah, like I said, different conflict management styles can be helpful in every sort of situation. If you ever enter something and you're reacting, in a very, compromising way, you know, or accommodating way. It might be advantageous to kind of switch to, something else, right? But by knowing yourself and trying to fully understand each situation that's going on, it'll really help you understand which conflict management style is needed for which conflict that you're in, right? And so if you know your own default patterns, right, you're able to exercise more self-awareness, right? And so when you have more self-awareness of your own patterns, right, you can pay attention to if they're working or not, because sometimes you might feel like, oh, I'm just speaking to a brick wall, well, if that's the case, maybe change your approach a little bit, or you know just try something different. It's okay to explore alternatives, it's okay to try something new, um, because you never know what might work, right? um, and that's sort of the beauty of all of it. We don't know how it's going to end, but it's kind of like this sort of maze, or like this journey that you're taking towards the end, and then you might be excited with the results, you might not be excited with the results, but you know it's about having an open mind, it's about having that self-awareness and having you know emotional regulation to be able to enter a conversation fully, rather than like quite limited, if that makes sense. So I'd like to open the floor, hear from you guys. You guys can either write it in the chat or speak one by one, but I wanted to know, which one do you all use most often? If you wanted to give like a short example, that'd be okay too, but just wanted to hear from you guys. You guys can unmute too,
Could you
or if you,
repeat the question?
yeah, totally. Um, just wondering, which conflict style do you find yourself gravitating towards the most? Like, which one do you feel like you use the most in disagreements or conflicts? Like out of the five, and I can go back to the picture, to this picture, if that would help you guys out.
I am an avoider. And I see how, in looking at this, I can see how it has affected um, my relationships in looking at this, because being an avoider, I want peace at all cost, and the cost has cost me. The
Right.
cost was the I'm a doormat, and it's
Right.
hard to get yourself, when you're in this role, when you've been doing this for a long time, it's hard to pull yourself out of that thing, and people don't take you serious when you try.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing.
I feel like it depends on the conflict for me. If it's a
Mhm.
really minor conflict, it's easy to resolve and you can just compromise and like how do you feel and stuff. But if it's like a big conflict and it affects me and I'm thinking about it, I tend to like avoid for a little bit just to like gather my thoughts
Mhm.
and but that like the avoidance, it sometimes, like, it's, like, wrong because it also gives me anxiety and gives the other person anxiety too, so, like, the longer I avoid, like, the more anxiety-inducing it becomes, so but by the end of it, like, I do compromise with the person, and I wanna hear them out and see how they feel, and I wanna validate their feelings, and then I want them to hear me out and see how I feel, and I want them to validate my feelings, so that's what I do, like, I avoid and then I compromise. And yeah. I guess it also depends on the person too. Like, there's just some people that don't understand you at all, and you just kind of have to accommodate to them. But like those people, like I'm not really close to at all, so I just avoid them in general. But from the past, like
Yeah.
that's just the kind of person they are. But
Yeah.
overall, I'm compromising. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing. And I see Benedict said, I often use the most collaborating option. I used to be an associator until I figured it wasn't really myself. Yeah, no, I totally get that, you know,
Yeah,
as
because oh sorry, you can continue.
no, you go.
Yeah, because like I'm mostly a collaborative person in terms of
Oh,
mindset. I used to be a compromise mindset. Like sometimes, like I lose some, but you know, someday other will like lose some too. But until I just realized that kind of turn that fixed mindset into a growth one. Because
mhm,
there's no really pros if I'm gonna lose. Unless it'll
right,
attribute to something else, I'm just mostly losing myself or my plan or my efforts. I just figured that, you know, instead of just being passive or just going on a fixed mindset, I just figured that like, you know, I don't really have to lose all the time, but I can't let some people win either in some terms, or you know, not getting my part. So I mostly just collaborate so both parties can win. But if it's like a thing that goes against me or against others, I'm just gonna try to compete and then win some. But yeah, that's mostly me.
yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Oh, I see one here. I use more of the competing accommodating option. Yeah, yeah. All of them have, you know, their uses and advantages and disadvantages. You know, not all of them, not all of them aren't like infallible. Like there's always going to be some sort of drawback. Maybe not with the collaborating option, but you know, definitely with the other four. Um, but yeah, so thank you very much. That was the end. I really appreciate everyone um, sharing their input. Um, Hope you guys learned some skills you could use for anytime you might come up against another um, conflict with someone. Oh, here's Ashley saying, compromising and competing, depending on the situation, you may see avoidance, and it's for the other person. Yeah, totally, definitely.
So I have a question.
Oh, yeah,
If you're having like a conflict and you're trying to resolve it, and you think you have it resolved, but then it keeps coming up again, it keeps coming up again, it keeps coming up again, and it never gets resolved. It just gets more and more frustrating because you think it's resolved, but then the other person keeps doing the same thing. How do you get
right.
past that?
I mean, it might be there's certain times where the conflict might be resolved in your eyes, but it's not in theirs. So um, maybe talking with them, seeing like if there's anything that can happen, but you know, try to keep an open mind. Um, yes, Ashley.
I was just gonna offer my 2 cents. In situations like that, for me, I've had to seek out a mediator where that person can break down what each party is saying a little better, because maybe there's some lines being crossed, something's not um, being received properly, and that way also it removes the emotions from the actual conversation. And if that doesn't work after that, I'm gonna avoid the person, because you could just be a problem for me, and that's not healthy for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you to everyone who joined us today. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you at the next one on December 2nd. And we're going to be talking about